All right, Pete, are we ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right, very good. Well, welcome everyone. This is Bryson Duck. I'm the industry director for TriNet. We provide small and medium-sized businesses full service HR solutions tailored by industry. And if you have questions about the avalanche of happenings with the Family Medical Leave Act, the Employee Retention Tax Credit, Social Security tax deferral, any of those things, employee retention credit, we can certainly help. It is my pleasure to introduce Pete Machalek and Troy Parkinson today of Sage Presence. I had the privilege of attending a presentation by Sage Presence last month, and they were the guest speaker at a dinner that we hosted in Minneapolis for our architecture and engineering clients. And we got fantastic feedback, so I'm really excited to have Pete and Troy on the phone today. Pete is one of the co-authors of AEC Interviews, and they teach business owners of all types, including architects, engineers, marketing, advertising, and consulting, story-based selling. And so today's call with Sage Presence is on telling your story in uncertain times. And today's call will be really a flexible conversation about how to maximize virtual communication effectiveness with prospects and clients, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. So with that, I will turn it over to you, and welcome, Pete.
All right. Thanks very much, Bryson. Hey, Troy, are there any sort of technical or mechanical things you?
Yeah, absolutely. What I can do is welcome everyone. I'm Troy Parkinson with Sage Presence. I'll help moderate the conversation today with Pete. A couple of housekeeping notes as you're coming into this, although we're all getting to be used to using Zoom now, but we do have a Q&A option here. So if you do have questions along the way, feel free to use the Q&A pop-up window in your screen, or feel free to drop me a note in the chat. I'll be monitoring those things during the conversation with Pete, and it'll be an opportunity for you to ask your questions throughout our conversation here. And Pete, maybe share with us a little bit about what you'd like to cover today and what you want to make sure that people know during this time.
Fantastic, thank you. So yeah, welcome everybody. The thinking behind this webinar today is that there are, in a way, we're all leaders. So this is a session that is for leaders. And as I think about these uncertain times, these are the times that require leaders, that bring out the best and the most from leaders. These are the times that kind of require leaders to step up and be what they need to be. I mean, it's always fun to be a leader when things are going well and you can just take credit for all the great stuff that's going on right now. But when things are challenging, that's when the people around us and the people who report to us and the people who work with us really appreciate a leader who's positive, who's confident, and who can tell a story that actually makes us believe that it's all gonna turn out all right. As a fan of the Beatles, I have always loved John Lennon's slogan, which was, let's see, it's everything is going to be all right in the end. If it isn't all right, then it isn't the end. And that's kind of a theme of this session today. I want us to think about the story that as leaders we're responsible for as we communicate with our teams. And as non-official leaders of organizations, we're all representatives of our organizations. We all need to kind of get out there and communicate the story of the firm. We all need to be able to tell the story of the firm in a business development sense. So that's the second thing that this session is about. This is all about being able to tell your story confidently and effectively to whoever it is that you're talking about, so that they believe it. They're won over by it. They are accepting the story. So that's really what I want to focus on with you. That's what I invite your questions to be on. I would love to hear what gets in your way as you think about the stories that you need to be responsible for, the stories that you need to tell, and as you think about the audiences that you're kind of responsible for, the audiences that you're there to make a difference for.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. One of the first questions that I want to kick off with is, how is this pandemic impacting business development? What are you seeing? What are you seeing from AE companies that you've been in communication with? How are people adapting to business development in this unprecedented time?
Great. I'm going to talk about that in two ways. First, I want to talk about just sort of my own individual experience with it, because I do a lot of business development for Sage Presence. And I want to share what I've been picking up from folks as I've talked to members of the AE world out there. So from my own personal experience, I know that when this thing hit, when the first couple days that I was shut up at home, and I'm reaching out to prospects and clients over the phone the way that I have been for years, my initial thought was, nobody's going to want to talk to me about business right now. Nobody's going to want to hear from me and talk about the same old, same old. So I was really kind of, in a way, I was kind of laid low. I was like, man, I was struck with the idea of maybe I just should sort of keep to myself right now and give people some time to kind of figure stuff out. But I worked my way past that and started to reach out anyway. And what I found myself doing was making nothing but human connections with people, really just kind of checking in on folks and finding out how things were going for them in this brave new world that we're all just kind of figuring out. And I think that was a really good thing to do. It was a really nice beat to hit, and it allowed me to show up as a human being for the folks that I have a relationship with. And it helped me strengthen the relationship just by being caring and not trying to push anything, but really just wanting to find out how this whole thing was affecting them. And what I found out in my conversations with folks was I was kind of surprised that a vast majority of folks were saying, man, I've never been busier. There's just so much to do. There's a ton of work. So whereas I was hit by this this beat of like, I don't know if I should be doing anything. The folks that I was connecting the most with had a ton of stuff to do, so that their projects weren't stopping. They were telling me that a couple of them were getting pushed back, were being scheduled a little bit farther back in the year, but a ton of them were continuing to happen. And so a ton of work needed to get done. And so the folks that I'm talking to are doing a lot of work, both independently, just them and their computer, but a lot of work also virtually, interacting with prospects and clients through a camera. So that's what we found ourselves focusing on at Sage Presence too, is helping people make the most of their engagements through a camera as they work with folks in a shared team experience, and also as they reach out to folks in a business development way.
Maybe let's take a moment, Pete, to talk about the dynamics of connecting via the camera. It seems that when it comes to communication now, it's not the way we're maybe all traditionally used to. So what tips do you have with how to be confident when you're dealing with a virtual meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's probably the most common question that we get as we talk through this thing, because it really is. It's one of the biggest differences between speaking to a room full of people when you share that room and speaking to a bunch of people when you're presenting to them through a camera. So right now I'm seeing a mess of faces on my screen, and those faces are in a different place than my lens. So I'm speaking to the faces. And I think as you watch me through your screen, you can see that I'm not actually looking directly at you. And the reason for that exactly is because the faces in my configuration, my technological configuration, which is pretty darn common, the faces are underneath the lens. So I think you either consciously or unconsciously register me as not exactly connecting with you terribly well right now, because even though to my brain I'm looking at you, to your brain I'm looking underneath you. So what I need to do is stop looking at your images and start looking at you through the lens. So right now, I can't see how you're responding. I can't see how anybody looks right now. All I'm seeing is a lens. That's what I'm focused on. Your images are kind of in my lower peripheral vision, and I am just focused on reaching out to you through the lens without worrying about the fact that I can't see anything back. And what I'm remembering is back in the day when I would talk to people over the phone, I couldn't see him at all. It wasn't an option at all. So instead, I'm just pouring all of my attention into the messages I'm trying to communicate. I'm going to check in with you as much as I possibly can. And I'm going to be okay with the idea of not seeing the real-time responses that I rely on when I'm in a room with people, and that I'm hoping for over a camera, that I need to come to terms with not getting when I'm speaking.
What advice do you have to folks about how to present themselves on camera? You know, we're in a variety of different stages of being comfortable. We're in our homes, which also makes it unique and challenging. What advice are you giving to clients about how to present yourself on these virtual meetings?
Well, there's a ton of technical things that I can only speak a little bit about. So maybe I'll start there. But I'm going to get to the stuff that I think is more important. So technically, you'll notice that you can see my head, you can see my shoulders, you can see me gesture. In general, I recommend that you be about this far from the lens so that people can see your hands as you speak, because hands really are a great communication tool. I recommend that the lighting be decent enough that people can see you. Ideally, Troy, your setup, I'm gonna let you talk for just a second so people can see you. Your setup is better than mine. So say something.
Sure. In my environment right here, I happen to be fortunate enough to have a lot of natural light coming through in my home. But I'm not afraid to set my room to be in an environment that allows my camera to be, as Pete has already shared, a couple of the key things. You want to have your camera lens about mouth height. It gives you a chance to kind of get squared into your screen, you know, and give yourself a little bit of depth when you can. The different platforms provide different ways of presenting yourself. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm still wearing a suit coat, even though I'm in my home. I still actually have, you know, I have pants on. I have all of these other things. You see these things now in the Zoom world where people are, you know, wearing their beach clothes or no pants or whatever the case may be. But when I connect with folks, when I plan on having a virtual meeting, I do what I can as though I would if I were going to meet them face to face at a coffee shop. So in my situation, I try to put myself in a room where I've got the best lighting, I've got the best sound. And, you know, the truth is it's not the ideal situation. I have 3 children. They're all distance learning right now. They're all upstairs. My wife is home. So we have a full house, and everyone has to go find a room for an hour while Dad goes on to, you know, a webinar. And so you are dancing with some dynamics, but also having a level of grace and understanding for that person you're meeting with, because you understand we're all not in that same situation. So I had a great conversation just the other day with a TriNet person via a webinar Zoom meetup meeting, and she was in her kitchen and I was in my basement, and it was just good to see each other, and it was just good to make that human connection, even if we weren't in that perfect environment. But for me, I'm in my living room. I'll move my camera a minute. You know, I've got a setup here. I got a stool. I've got books set up. Rather than just tossing the laptop on my lap or at my desk. The other thing I do is I stand. when I'm presenting and communicating, because we find at Sage that it's best to be engaged with that individual, particularly in business development conversations. Now, granted, if you're sitting down for a meeting, you can sit at a table. You're not normally standing in meetings. But in this instance where we're presenting, we do like to stand because it gives us more of an engaged environment, particularly when we coach people around high stakes interview prep as well.
Yeah, totally agree with every word you said. And let me just underscore a couple of those. Dressing for the role, dressing for the part is a great idea. Not just because they might see your pants, but it affects how you feel. I think you feel more professional when you are dressed professionally. And as Troy just pointed out, when you're standing, there's more energy. I used to know a really fantastic sales rep who was 10 times better selling when he was walking around with his phone. And this is pre-mobile phone. He would grab his phone with a really long cord on it, and he would pace all around the sales space. And he was just so much more powerful that way. He felt more confident. His words were flowing more. And I'm absolutely certain he was getting more sales because people can hear that confidence.
So Pete, let's shift a little bit back into the business development conversation specifically about, now that we've covered the technology of the video environment, what is the experience like for sort of energizing your BD teams? What recommendations do you have to help your team members who are facing these challenging times and reaching out to prospects? What recommendations do you have to help engage the team actively in business development?
Great. So probably the number one most important thing is to do what our friends at TriNet demonstrated so well at the beginning of this session. It's reminding your team that it's all about providing value to people who can benefit from the value that you have to offer. It's about engaging in these conversations with the idea that you're there to help. The thing that got in my way the most when the world changed and I was kind of laid low for a little bit was just this idea that nobody's going to want to hear from me right now. I'm just going to be an irritant. I'm just going to be a distraction from the more important things that are on their minds right now. But we can't be held back by thoughts like that. We have got to remember that we represent something valuable, and specifically, we represent something valuable to the people that we're reaching out to. We are not there to waste anybody's time. We are not there to distract anybody. We are there to provide something valuable that they need right now. So if they're busy, if they don't have time for it, don't let that get in your way. Instead, just be there to provide the value, be there as a source of help, and see what you can do to schedule time to actually tell the story and ask questions to get their story. They need you, and they need you to stay focused and committed around the thing that you can provide help with. They need you to be confident in the value that they represent, that you represent. So remind your team about that. Remind them that it's not an irritant, it's not a distraction, it's actually an amazing contribution to make right now, both in terms of checking in on them in a human way and checking in on them in this professional way that represents the value that you have to talk about.
Excellent, thanks. One other thought that hits my mind, Pete, and again, from a sort of a housekeeping standpoint, I know there are some that had a little bit of problem logging in and now they're on the phone. So thank you for joining us over your phone. We will be actually recording this session as well. So there will be a follow-up opportunity to watch if you wanted to watch at a later point. Feel free to throw any questions out there that you might have. I've got a few more here on my list, but if you're watching and you have any challenge that you're facing in this moment, anything you're facing with telling your story, please feel free to include your questions in the Q&A or in the chat box. Pete, I wanted to take a moment to have you explain a little bit about how one goes about telling their story during this time. And I know that Sage has a particular modality that they use when it comes to telling your story. Can you share a little bit about the importance of how to structure your message during this time?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we do have a nice way to think about it. And the thing that I really love about the way that we think about it is simple. We were working with a leader several years ago, and when we taught him our story structure, he was like, "Really? Really? Is that all it is? That's fantastic." He was used to like 37 steps, and what we have is 5 steps. So thank you for pulling that up, Troy. This is our story structure model. I'm going to talk about it briefly, kind of generically, and then I'm going to demonstrate. And ultimately, I'm going to tell you the Sage Presence story following this model. So we start with the main character. The main character is who the story is about. In our definition, stories are by nature about change. They need to communicate change. So the main character is the person or the people that experience the change. Then we look at the beginning of the story. You'll see in our little model here, this negative B. Negative B is not just any beginning, it's a not so happy beginning. It's a problematic situation that the main character is in before anything really happens in a story. Then we look at the middle of the story. It's the action, it's the stuff that happens, and it's the solution that's delivered by the hero. So the middle of the story impacts the situation that the main character is in the beginning of this story. And then we end with a better situation that the main character is in. So a very contiguous telling of this story here is there's a main character who's experiencing a problematic situation. Then somebody comes along and delivers a solution, actually does stuff, leads action that impacts the situation that the main character is in, and brings about a better situation, delivers the main character to a better position at the end, a better situation. It's building a bridge from that problematic situation for the main character to the better situation at the end. So when I tell the Sage Presence story, when I'm talking to prospects about the difference that we create for our prospects, I'm not really talking about Sage Presence. I'm talking about our prospects, our clients. I'm talking about the people that we make a difference for. So our main character is professional service firms, A&E firms, architects, engineers. Their problem right now, their problem that we can impact is their team members need to be absolutely intrinsically involved in the business development process. But architects and engineers in general basically want to architect. Architects want to architect, engineers want to engineer. They don't really love the idea of business development. It takes kind of a special professional to really be excited about the business development part of the job. So what we do is we build BD skills in those professionals. We help the client-facing team members get better at telling the story of the firm, building relationships with prospects, listening for opportunities to help, and leading conversations that can make that help. And by the time we're done, they have the confidence and the skills that they need to be an active representative of the brand of the firm. So that's the overarching story of Sage Presence clients. A slightly more distilled version is A&E firms come to us when they're not building as much business as they want. We build business development skills in their professional folks, and at the end, they are landing the business that they want to land with the whole team.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. One of the things I wanted to throw out to those on the call is that if you have, if you'd like to work with Pete here for a few minutes on trying to work through your personal story at this time, if there's someone here who's trying to figure out how to communicate their company's value proposition effectively, communicate their message effectively, drop me a note in the chat window and I can have you share your story with Pete, and you guys can actually work through this together on the call.
That would be great. And let me broaden it out a little bit, because I don't want you to think of these stories as just being value proposition stories for the organization. Like in my demo just now, it totally could be that. I'd be happy to work with you on that. The second possibility is if you're a leader and you're looking at sitting down with your team virtually and leading a meeting with them and talking about what the plan is going to be going forward in the middle of this coronavirus situation, I'd be happy to help you shape your thoughts around what that overarching message could be.
Excellent. While we wait for anybody to volunteer if they'd like, I want to go to one question that came in our Q&A. This circles a little bit back to the technology, but that's a conversation about the virtual backgrounds. I noticed, Pete, that you're not in a virtual background, and you could choose to be with the technology that's available. Well,
Yeah.
What's your recommendation on virtual backgrounds? Because there is some talk of them sometimes working, sometimes not working.
Yeah, you know, our whole team has experimented around with them, and our general recommendation at the moment is they're a little cheesy and a little problematic. Having said that, I did work with a team of presenters, and they opted for a virtual background. What they landed on was a very nice, simple, single color. They put a little bit of text. Over their heads to just kind of label to the audience what this thing was about. And it worked pretty well. The only downside that I saw was you do see this kind of obvious outline because of the limitations of technology right now. Sometimes fingers disappear, sometimes your ears disappear, sometimes your hair disappears. So it looks less than perfect, but the good news is right now, everybody's extremely understanding. Everybody understands that this isn't the core of your business. This isn't, nobody expects you to be an aesthetic professional when it comes to this aspect of technology. So it is okay. And if you are presenting as a team in a virtual interview, having a shared background is a great visual cue to communicate, yes, we are all on the same team here and we are all on the same page. So it's less than ideal, but it can work.
Excellent, thanks. One other question that's come to mind here is this idea of virtual networking. You know, in a world where we're all used to being out at events a couple times a week, sometimes luncheons, dinners, what recommendations have you been seeing about virtual networking opportunities, and what would you recommend to people about interacting in virtual networking?
Yeah, biggest thing I can throw out there is recognize that there are still events happening. So for the first, I don't know, 10 days of this, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do any business development at all? These events are getting canceled left and right. And what I'm very happy to report is that the people in charge of these networking events are getting creative. and they're coming up with ways to do them virtually. Just yesterday, I was involved in an event hosted by the local Twin Cities chapter of SMPS. And this was really, really cool. Normally in the physical version of this particular kind of event, there's maybe 10, 12 people. There were 30 people at this event. So the people in charge were kind of blown away by that. And they were prepared. They used Zoom, and they had this, they had this fantastic Zoom tool that allowed the person in charge to kind of break us up into small groups. So it's impossible to network with 30 people, you know, even in the real world. Even when you have the capability to wander from person to person, you're never going to be able to talk to all 30. So what they did is they broke us up into 5 or 6 groups of 5 or 6 people. And it was just really nice. It was a nice environment to be able to check in with a handful of people, really be able to make a nice human connection with that small number of people, and have actual full-fledged networking conversations. So, so keep looking for stuff like that and actually participate. It's pretty darn cool.
Hey, Pete, could I comment on that a little bit?
By all means.
Sure. So it's interesting you bring that up. We've been talking a lot about that here at TriNet, and you know, we have hundreds of reps out in the field, so we get some pretty good analytics. And we've seen certain segments of our business are more prone to driving business through networking events, through ecosystem, et cetera. And those segments of our business are having less new pipeline development than the segments that traditionally do more calling and more kind of traditional kind of calling and cadences and things of that nature. So while we're doing all the virtual networking, et cetera, as well, we're now kind of going back to some of those segments of our business that are more traditional networking, and kind of going back to basics and saying, hey, in addition to that, you need to get back to, here's some calling cadences, here's, you know, emails, LinkedIn, all those types of things, to try and get them up to a point. We have some segments of our business that are actually doing really, really well in terms of building pipeline, first meetings, et cetera. But those are the ones that have to use the more traditional methods. So there are great virtual meetings that are going on, like the one we're doing right now, right? And a lot of those types of things as well. But we're finding more success as well, just in more the traditional, just picking up the phone and calling, because people are available. They're, you know, they're sitting at home. And a lot of those work phones are, we find, are now forwarded to cell phones, which is nice. And also a lot of the gatekeepers are not gatekeeping, which is a great thing as well.
Thank you. Yes, some very excellent points made there, Anthony. Couldn't agree with you more. So yeah, one thing I want to underline about what you just said, absolutely, we can and should be reaching out to folks the way that we always have been historically, traditionally. Phone calls are absolutely an important part of what we should be doing right now. If there's a difference, it's in the past we have built up. We've had a pattern of building up from a phone call to a face-to-face meeting. Now we can build up from a phone call to a virtual meeting. And in a lot of ways, these virtual meetings are actually more convenient and more doable than the face-to-face meetings very often normally are.
One thing I've experienced as well, Pete, is an opportunity to participate in some of these town hall events by some of the associations that we've been involved with, and we're involved with within the architect and engineering world. So I was recently on an AIA, American Institute of Architects, Minnesota town hall meeting for vendors who work with architects in the community. And what I discovered in that event was it was a real opportunity to just come together and, for lack of a better word, commiserate about what the challenges are we're facing collectively as a community. And we were also able to share how we could help each other in ways and share information about upcoming events or share information or ideas. And so I've noticed that within our market here in the Twin Cities, there are a lot of these town hall events that are keeping people connected, sort of these happy hour events as well, where communities are just getting together to have a drink in their own home and to talk and connect. But for those of you out here who are watching and listening, pay attention to those town hall meetings in particular, where the organizations and associations that support your industry are there to try to help as well. Because everybody's world is turned upside down and everyone's trying to figure out all of the beats in business for those industries.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. One additional thought along these lines. I haven't done this yet, but I think it's a brilliant idea. Somebody mentioned it to me. You know how in a typical face-to-face meeting, you are asking somebody if you can buy them a cup of coffee. You could ship a nice little bag of coffee beans to somebody that you would love to have a conversation with, and include a little card with them, and say, would love to schedule a time when we can have a cup of this together, something like that. It's a nice, warm way to reach out, build a relationship, and get a phone conversation or a virtual conversation where maybe in the past you just haven't been able to schedule that.
Hey, it's Anthony again. One more thing that we're doing that's interesting is that we've had some success with the sending an Uber Eats virtual gift card. Say, hey, let's have lunch and schedule some time at lunch meeting, and we've had good response with those types of things. One of our clients is a company called Snack Nation. They deliver healthy snacks to clients, to their workforce, and now they've got a whole Snack Nation deliver at home. We're doing a promotion with them that you deliver healthy snacks at home for your employees. So there's a lot of ways to get creative that people appreciate.
That's fantastic. Oh. Hey, Troy, you're on mute. Can't hear you, Troy.
Yep, there we are. In an effort to balance household noises and things, I forget to turn the mute on and off. Another dynamic that comes into it is this idea, Pete, what would you recommend to folks when they say that the teams are just hunkering down? There may be a call that says, hey, you know what, they were this close to making a sale with you, a month ago, and now they've said, don't get in touch with me for 90 days, or we're hunkering down and we're just trying to figure it out. What recommendations do you give for keeping those relationships and following up on them through this time? Or when you get just someone that says, I can't talk right now, when you get those sort of closed doors, if you will. Yeah.
Great questions. And they are two very different ones, I think. So let's talk about the hunkering down first. When I've heard folks say something along those lines, and to be honest, I heard it when this started, but I'm hearing it less and less. So I find that to be a really good sign. But when you do hear this this idea of there are just too many unknowns here, we're not making any investments in anything right now, the best thing that I found that I could do is really understand. Ask questions and feed it back to folks, and really just let them know that I understand what it is that they're dealing with, what their concerns are. And then I'm gonna ask questions about what they're focused on, what their definition of success is, what circumstances they will need to have in existence before they feel like they can do something. And that way, I'm doing two things. I'm building relationship with them. I'm communicating to them that I understand what's going on for them right now. And if they haven't thought about that light at the end of the tunnel, I'm getting them to talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm getting them to define for themselves what better actually means and what circumstances need to be in place for them to actually be able to think in a different way, which will also give me a clue about when I can check back in with them. So after I get clear on current problematic situation and target goal situation, I ask for permission to follow up. So it could be as simple as, well, if we haven't talked by a month from now, can I just reach back and see how things are going for you? And it's extremely rare for somebody to say, no, don't. You know, they might say, well, 2 months instead of 1 month. They might throw out a different time frame. But the really important thing is I'm staying in control of the next communication. I'm owning the responsibility of the next conversation, and I'm not sort of allowing them to say, well, don't call me, I'll call you. If they do throw out some version of that, then I'll say yes, absolutely, and if we haven't talked by blah blah blah, I'll check back in. So let's see, that was the hunkering down question. What was the second question?
They just closed the door.
Oh, right. So yeah, the resistance thing, it's a variation of the same conversation. I'm going to start asking more questions, and I'm going to be respectful, and I'm going to ask more questions. So it's like, oh, gotcha. Yeah, now is a bad time. When would be a good time? And if they don't know, then I'll say, oh, totally get it. You've got a lot to figure out. I'll check back in with you in a week and see if things have changed. I'm not going to allow them to just nail the door shut and not give me permission to check back in with them. In general, what I've found is even the most scared, resistant folks really do appreciate it when you own the conversation, and when you kind of insist on bringing opportunity to them, on bringing hope and possibility to them. And that really is what every sales conversation is about. It's about bringing a possible newer, better situation for them.
Thanks, Pete. That was great. We have one question that comes in about talking about AE trends. And if we're seeing any trends that are happening now, specifically in relation to the COVID-19 environment and the virus environment, one example might be how interviews are changing. But are you seeing any other trends that are changing in the environment?
Well, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning. What I'm happily hearing is that the projects are going on. These buildings have been deemed essential. And so whereas some of the projects have been delayed, or schedules around projects have been realigned in somewhat, the good news is they do seem to be continuing to go on. Another trend seems to be that the focus on pre-construction and design allows a lot of work to get done in a safe way, because people, a lot of that really is people just working individually or separately, just them and their computers and their phones, and they're able to get a tremendous amount done communicating in that virtual way. I say all that, and I know that there are some states out there that aren't as definitively open as Minnesota has been. I know that there are some states that have been a little bit hesitant around it, and I know that some of the construction workers on projects are very understandably having concerns working on projects at the site right now, because not all recommendations, not all safety recommendations can be kind of manifested fully. A lot of these folks really do feel like they are in harm's way to some extent. And my sense with the organizations is that they really, really do care about that, and they are doing everything that they possibly can to have their workers be as safe as they possibly can over the course of these projects.
Can you say a little more about the interview process?
Sure.
What are you hearing about how projects that were on the front burner now and they were going to be shortlisted for an interview, how are those things changing, and what are you seeing in the industry around interviewing?
So, yep, a lot of them have been pushed back, I think, as the selection committees, as the owners are kind of refiguring things out as a result of this whole virus situation. And they're opting for the interview scenario happening virtually. And the way that they're doing it is there seem to be multiple trends. So one of them is the selection committees are owning the process. They're figuring out how they want it to be done, and they're reaching out to their short list of companies, and they're saying, okay, you're going to use this tool. We're going to turn it on at this time, and it's going to go like this. In which case, the short list teams need to learn how to use that tool if it isn't a tool that they're comfortable with, and need to engage with the selection committee as much as possible in order to prep with them as much as the selection committee will allow them. We have heard of some interviews that are less strict than that allow the interview teams to steer, to say, hey, we've got this tool, we'd love to present it to you using this, and we'd love for you to do this and this with it at the beginning, so that you can see exactly what we're looking to present to you. And that does seem, in my mind, that's the better way to go. As I've come to see interviews, by and large, as I've talked to selection committee members, what these things are, what the whole concept of an interview is about, is it's a chemistry experiment, either consciously or unconsciously done by the selection committee. It's by the owners of a project who are recognizing we need a design team, or we need an engineering team. And we know by looking at their proposals, we know that they can do the job. Now it's a question of what is it like to interact with them? How do they work together, and how do they work with folks like us? What's it feel like? What's it taste like? So it is always better to do it in a room together, because that's what the ultimate work is going to be like. But virtual is not that far from that experience. If you as an interview team can present yourself in a really natural way through the lens, if you can communicate who and what you are in a truly authentic way, then they're gonna get a sense of what you're like, and they're gonna be able to make their decision based on that.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. Just a quick shout out there to any last minute questions for Pete as we're coming up towards the tail end of the hour. I want to make sure that if anybody has any final questions, anything that's burning in your world that you'd like to have addressed in terms of how to communicate during these uncertain times, feel free to send your questions out. But ultimately, Pete, as I wait to see if any other final questions come in, my last question for you is, what sort of the overarching advice do you have for people moving forward? What can they do today to help them communicate their message effectively in uncertain times? And how do they stay optimistic and positive in a time that's still so very uncertain? So 2 questions there.
Great. Yeah, let me start with that second one. Um, it because that second one really is the most important one, right? And I think this is relevant to all of us. It's not just leaders. It's not just people in professional scenarios who are talking to prospects and clients. This is all of us in how we engage everybody else in the rest of our life. We all know people who are pessimistic and who can't seem to get past the current problematic moment. We all know how that lands for us. When somebody is stuck in a problem and can't seem to get out of it, it can drag us down. So what we have to do is focus on what we at Sage Presence call the happier ending. It's always believing that the future is not the same as the now. By definition, the future is better. We get to say what it looks like specifically, but generically, we believe that the future is going to be better than the now. And if a future moment comes along and it's not better, well, it's not the end. We're just still in the middle, moving towards that end that we want. So the really important thing for all of us to do is really start to ask ourselves the question, so what is the ending that I want? What's the ending that I'm committed to? And the clearer that we can get on that, both in terms of the scenario and in how we're going to feel as a result, the more we're going to believe in it and the more energy we're going to feel in creating it. And it's that energy that's going to allow us to get into action about it. And in that sense, we get to become our own heroes. We get to do what needs to get done to bring about the future that we want. As we think about that future, what I recommend is don't just think about yourself as the main character. It's okay it's absolutely okay to have a story in your head that is about you. But also think about the people that you're there for. And I think there are going to be multiple stories in your heads. Think about the story of the family that you're taking care of. Think about the story of your prospects, the people that your business exists to make a difference for. Think about your existing clients and what you can do to bring about a better situation for them. The more you can come up with multiple stories that end happy, that are about the people that you care about, the more energy that you're going to feel to do the stuff that needs to get done to move things forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Pete. And now we'll toss it back to you, Anthony and Bryson, if there are any final thoughts you have as we bring our session here today to a close.
All right. Well, thank you. Go ahead, Anthony.
Go ahead, Bryson.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Pete and Troy at Sage Presence for facilitating this. A lot of really good insight and information that you guys have shared. So thank you for that. And I will tell you, I've spent hours with labor law attorneys in the past 2 weeks to, understand all the changes that are happening from an employment standpoint. And I have no idea how a company with 1 or 2 HR employees could digest it and, let alone implement a strategy. And have it in place, now that it's been signed into law. So again, anybody, if you have any questions about the, what's happening with the Family Medical Leave Act or employee retention tax credit or Social Security tax deferrals, anything, related to the employee retention credit, we can certainly help, invite, ask the person that invited you to the call. So, and again, thank you to Sage, and Anthony, I'll let you wrap us up.
Yeah, great, thanks. And one thing there, Pete, when you're kind of at the end, that was that I just wanted to bring up is, talking about the happy ending, right, in the future. And this is really for, I've talked to probably 20 different reps the last couple weeks. had one-on-ones with them. And one thing I find is that the people that are, let's just generalize here, say under 30, they're having a tougher time, I think, with this than the rest of us. I've lived, you know, look, I've been through 9/11, I've been through the mortgage meltdown, et cetera, et cetera. It always works itself out. We always come out stronger, and everything is going to be okay. And I think whether you are talking to someone in that age range, or we're all leaders, whether we're managers or not. I think that's one thing we just need to keep in mind when talking to people, is that, look, it always works out. We come out stronger, and there always is a happy ending. And a lot of that is up to us. And right now it's difficult. We have to acknowledge that, but we have to stay positive and know that great things are coming around the corner. With that, Pete, I'll throw it to you, and feel free to close us out.
Fantastic. Well, Anthony, I couldn't agree with you more. Very nicely spoken. And yeah, I would just like to invite any of the participants out there to share any questions, any follow-up questions that you have for us. What we at Sage Presence are all about is helping folks project confident presence when they need it the most. Most commonly, what that means for us is interviews and business development conversations, but it's not just limited to that. So if anybody has any questions about stuff that's getting in their way when they need to project that confidence, please let us know. We would love to help.
And thank you again to TriNet for hosting us today. We all hope you are safe and healthy, and best of luck to you as you continue to navigate this new world. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.